over 60, and you feel like you just don't want to try as hard anymore? Like when the phone rings and you stare at it, deciding whether you have the energy to answer? Or when someone invites you somewhere and your first thought is how to say no without seeming cold? A lot of people call that laziness, but that's not what this is. This is exhaustion from something most people never name out loud, and if you've been feeling it, you're not the only one. This isn't about losing interest in life. It's about losing interest in performing, and there's a difference. For decades, many people over 60 have been holding themselves to standards they didn't choose. Standards about how to act, how to feel, what to say, and what not to say. They learned early that keeping it together mattered more than letting it show. So they did, for years. And now, in their 60s and beyond, that effort is starting to feel unbearable. It shows up in small ways. You stop answering certain phone calls. You skip events you used to attend without question. You let conversations end early because continuing them feels like too much. And inside, you might feel guilty, like something's wrong with you, like you've become difficult or distant or selfish. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the energy it takes to pretend everything is fine has run out. And when that energy is gone, what's left isn't laziness. It's honesty. It's the quiet realization that you don't want to fake enthusiasm anymore. You don't want to smile through discomfort. You don't want to show up just because it's expected. And for someone who spent most of their life doing exactly that, this shift can feel like failure. But most people don't realize this feeling didn't start recently. It started decades ago, back when you were taught that your value came from being useful, from not complaining, from keeping going, no matter how you felt inside. If you grew up in the 1950s, 60s, or 70s, you were raised in a culture that didn't make space for emotional visibility. You learned that strong people don't fall apart, that good people don't burden others, that adults handle things quietly and move on. So you did. You handled it. You kept your struggles private. You worked through exhaustion and doubt and loneliness without making it anyone else's problem. And that took energy, a lot of energy, the kind of energy that doesn't come back once it's spent. And now, after a lifetime of that, your system is telling you it's done. Not because you're weak, but because pretending has a cost, and you've been paying it for a very long time. And this is where the explanation usually gets it wrong. Most people assume this is about retirement, or aging, or losing purpose. And while those things are real, they're not the core of what this feeling is. This feeling is about emotional depletion. It's what happens when someone has been emotionally self-sufficient for so long that the idea of continuing to be that way feels impossible. And instead of recognizing that as a reasonable human response, many people over 60 interpret it as personal failure. They think they've become lazy, or negative, or difficult to be around. But that's not accurate. What they've become is tired of managing how they're perceived, tired of editing themselves in conversations, tired of performing okayness when they don't feel okay. And that exhaustion doesn't look like sadness or anger. It looks like withdrawal. It looks like not wanting to engage. And from the outside, that can look like someone who's given up. But giving up and stepping back are not the same thing. Giving up is defeat. Stepping back is protection. And for someone who's been performing emotional stability for decades, stepping back is not a character flaw. It's a boundary. It's the first honest thing they've allowed themselves to do in years. But that still doesn't explain why it feels like you're the only one carrying it. Because it is personal. This isn't just about being tired. It's about realizing that the version of yourself you've been showing the world isn't the version you actually are. And that gap, that distance between who you've been pretending to be and who you quietly are, gets harder to ignore as you get older. When you're younger, you can push through it. You can tell yourself it doesn't matter. But after 60, that gap starts to feel unbearable. And the worst part is, you can't explain it to most people, because the moment you try, it sounds like complaining, or bitterness, or self-pity. And you've spent your whole life avoiding being seen that way. So instead, you stay quiet. You stop showing up. You let relationships fade, not because you don't care, but because caring in the way people expect you to care feels like one more performance you can't sustain. Decades of observation show that many people in this age group begin to withdraw socially, not because they've lost interest in connection, but because they've lost the ability to perform it. And in a culture that equates emotional restraint with strength, that withdrawal gets misread. It gets labeled as depression, or stubbornness, or age-related decline, but it's none of those things. It's the natural result of a lifetime spent suppressing what you actually feel in favor of what you're supposed to feel. And when that suppression finally stops working, what's left isn't emptiness, it's relief. Quiet, uncomfortable, guilty relief. Relief that you don't have to keep pretending. Relief that you can finally stop performing, even if no one around you understands why. There's something quietly important to understand here. This phase of life is not about loss. It's about recalibration. And recalibration doesn't feel good. It feels like letting go of things that used to define you. It feels like disappointing people. It feels like becoming someone you don't recognize. But it's not a breakdown. It's a shift. A shift from living according to external expectations to living according to internal honesty. Many people at this stage start to feel guilty for wanting less social interaction, less responsibility, less performance, and they interpret that desire as selfishness. But it's not selfish to stop pretending. It's not selfish to admit that you're tired. It's not selfish to let go of roles that no longer fit. What's selfish is expecting someone to keep performing a version of themselves that no longer exists just because it makes other people more comfortable. And yet, that's exactly what many people over 60 feel pressured to do. They feel pressured to stay engaged, to stay positive, to stay useful, because that's what they've always done. And the idea of stopping, even when stopping is what they need, feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the people who rely on them, betrayal of the values they were raised with, betrayal of the version of themselves they've worked so hard to maintain. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't owe anyone your energy. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that no longer feels real. And if stepping back is what it takes to stop pretending, then stepping back is not failure. It's honesty. And honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is not something to apologize for. This part is rarely talked about, but it matters more than it seems. What you're feeling right now is not permanent. It's a phase, a necessary phase, a phase where your system is asking you to stop performing and start being. And that process doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes space. It takes the willingness to let go of who you've been in order to figure out who you actually are. And that's hard, especially when everyone around you is still expecting the old version. But this is not a decline. This is not the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of something quieter, something more honest, something that doesn't require you to keep up appearances or meet expectations or prove your worth through constant output. And if that sounds like relief, it's because it is. Relief that you can finally stop pretending. Relief that you can finally be tired without apologizing for it. Relief that you can finally exist without performing. And if you've been feeling this way, you're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're just done pretending. And that's not something to fix. It's something to honor. Many people never say this out loud. But if this felt familiar, you're not the only one.